就
Oh boy.
嗯
Till 10 p.m.
对对对，你自己这个 free
I know,
I
I know, it's okay. Yeah.
May I ask your name?
Yes, my name is Michel Bauwens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where and in which year were you born?
I was born in 1958 in Brussels, Belgium.
Could you introduce the ideas or projects you are currently working on that you hope more people will learn about?
Yes, so I'm working mostly around the concept now of cosmolocalism, and that means everything that's heavy is local, and everything that's light is global and shared. So global and shared means the sharing of knowledge, of code like free software and designs. And the local is heavy. It means that everything that's physical should be as close as possible to the place of need. And the reason we should do this is that humanity spends 3 times as much on transporting things and on making things, right? So by localizing, you can save theoretically, let's say 75% of matter energy usage. So you can do more with less. And then the second step is mutualization, which is creating common resources. Let's say you have 10 houses and they each have their apple tree, and something bad happens to you, to your apple tree, then you go hungry. But if you have, if you share the apple trees, then there will always be somebody with a good apple tree for the people sharing the apple tree. That's kind of the general idea. And so you can put land in common, you can do co-housing, co-living, maker spaces, hacker spaces, you can have shared transport. There's many ways, and the reason we can do this today at a much more cheap basis is basically the digital technology. So for example, I visited a cooperative housing complex in Seoul, South Korea. People can access the same housing 40% cheaper because it's a co-op. Then people who live in the co-op, they have their own cinema, their own library, their own swimming pool, so they can invest in their common resources. They also have their own school, so during COVID they could still send their kids to their own school. They also make agreements with local farmers, so you have things like community supported agriculture, where a group of consumers make an agreement with a group of producers, and they pay the same price every year for a percentage of the crop. And so in a good year they get more, in a bad year they get less, but it's an agreement of solidarity between consumers and producers. So all of this is cosmolocalism on the condition that you share the knowledge and the protocols, and all kinds of things can be shared. So you do permaculture, for example, you're very local, you feed in the mud, you work with local villagers, but the learning is global. You're learning from 12,000 other permaculture projects in the world, and so this is something a bit difficult to understand, so I'll try to make it simple. The current system is based on economies of scale. Economies of scale means making more of the same thing to make the unit price cheaper. So that's how you become competitive in the current system. But the price we pay for this is we need a lot more matter and energy, right? The way you do that is by maximizing the use of resources. What I'm talking about is economics of scope, doing more with the same thing. So if you're part of a collaborative network any innovation anywhere in the network becomes available to you. Anybody in the whole network who makes an improvement, you can learn from them. So that's the idea. So, you can apply it to agriculture, like eco-villages, but smart eco-villages that are well connected with global knowledge. You can do it with industry. This is called distributed manufacturing. And maybe I should give you an example of this. This project was called Arrival, and they had reduced the process of making a car from 750 processes to 50. Then they designed a physical platform with robots, and they can make cars on demand. So not mass production and then doing marketing and advertising to make people buy it, but on demand. So your municipality needs a van or a truck or a bus, they can just order it and will be made locally. And so the idea is you have circular economics, you have interoperability, you have modular design, you have biodegradable materials, so you can put all these things together to make very efficient production. And so, sorry, I talk quite a bit here, but I want to explain. I saw this big steel factory, and I know this region here is trying to do rural revitalization and is thinking, should we keep or should we not keep the steel factory? So I would keep it myself because I think it's good to have some industry. I think that's a good thing. But you can also reinvent industry. You don't have to use the old model of industry. You can use small local factories that serve the local population and then connect with all the other people in the rest of the world who are doing the same thing. So I think today the countryside, with access to the world knowledge, is no longer basically an isolated place because you have access to a lot of knowledge. And you should learn to tap into it. It's not a thing for the city, it's a thing for everyone.
Are there similarities and differences between cosmolocalism and anarchism or communism?
So in cosmolocalism, we use the word of the commons. So we don't use anarchism, we don't use communism, because we believe these were phenomena of the industrial age. So I'm sorry, I'm going to introduce a thinker, a Japanese thinker called Kojin Karatani, or Karatani Kojin, I think they say in Japan. And he wrote a book called The Structure of World History. So bear with me. He says the original mode of exchange, how people exchange value with each other, was gifting and commoning. And this was typical for tribal, kinship-based organization. By the way, we just visited a clan house. This is from that time. Okay. So anyway, it still exists in China. But as soon as we have civilization, we have markets and states. He calls that mode B and mode C. But these modes of extracting value from human beings and from the earth are very harsh in many ways. So you have tribal people, they live together, they know everyone. Once you have agriculture, they destroy the tribes. They have to flee to the mountains. Once you have industry, you chase away the farmers. They have to go to the city. They can no longer survive in the countryside. And now we have the cognitive economy with AI and robotics. Now we're chasing away people doing physical labor, but also even intellectual labor. So this is a mode of extraction of value. And what you see in history is that each invention of a new mode of extraction has created a reaction to make it softer, to adapt it to human society. So during mode B, it was agriculture. It was religion. Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. They want to make civilization more livable, not just for the warriors and the aristocracy, but for everybody. Respect your elders, speak the truth. So these are all ethical principles that make life in society better. In the industrial age, it's socialism, communism, anarchism, because we used to work together in big factories. But this is changing. Now many people work independently. Many people lose their job because of robotics, and many intellectual people also lose their job to AI. And so what we see emerging now through the digital world is shared knowledge resources, commons. Commons have always existed, but now they're coming back. And so that means that whatever you do, you're going to find other people in the world doing the same. You can connect with them. And you can organize an economy around your skills and shared knowledge. And so I use the commons as to say, this is the way today to make the world a better place. Karatani called it Mode D, but that's just a technical word. But so today Mode D is constructive networks. And the digital gives us a new freedom that we have. You can work locally, and have good relationships as you do with the local governor and work locally. But you can also tap the cosmos, the translocal knowledge, but also translocal capital, translocal inventions to collaborate better. So our body is in the physical sphere. So this is, the geosphere, the sphere of matter, and the biosphere, the sphere of life. But our brain is in the noosphere, in the sphere of knowledge. Before, you had to write a book, and then the book had to be transported, and that took time. Now you have on Zoom and Meetup and all these things. I know in China you have different names for it, but I think you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So now, if you have a problem, you can connect on Zoom, and you can ask, "How did you solve this?" And that person may be on the other side of the world, and he's giving you a solution for your local problem. So we have to organize our world in a new way, realizing that yes, we still live locally, we are physical beings, but our minds are now part of something, that is not non-local.
Yeah. Could you introduce the P2P Foundation?
Yes.
What kind of organization is it? When was it established, and how does it operate?
Yeah. So what I call peer-to-peer is the capacity for trans-local self-organization. So if I can now work with somebody somewhere in the world, and we can create a project, and we can work together on that project. But in a digital commons, often the people on the other side of the world, it doesn't pay you, and so he cannot tell you what to do, right? So you have to establish peer-to-peer relations from equal to equal, right? And that we don't always know how to work like that, but it's what you need to do when you operate in a digital commons. And so the Peer-to-Peer Foundation is dedicated to the study of peer-to-peer phenomena in the whole world, in every domain of human activity. So there's peer-to-peer spirituality, there's peer-to-peer politics, there's peer-to-peer business, governance, property formats, everything. It's changing the world. And the P2P Foundation is a network of people who observe what is happening in that field. And then I'm kind of an intellectual. I like to call myself an organic intellectual for the commons, which is a notion from Gramsci. And we try to think it, like, what does it mean? How can we improve the world? How can we be happier using, this new level of capacity that human beings have invented and that we didn't have 15 years ago? So the P2P Foundation is really dedicated to civilizational change, to how do we change from a geographic form of civilization, and we know how to do that for 5,000 years, to a translocal form of civilization, which still has the physical. We still need to manage the physical. We still need cities and municipalities and provinces, and we still need that because we live there. But we also need a new layer of civilization to deal with translocality, and then we need to make them compatible to each other. And so that's basically what we are doing. We started in 2005. And since then we have seen the invention of translocal money, of socially sovereign currencies that don't depend on a nation state or a corporation. We have seen global crowd lending and crowdfunding, so the ability to raise capital translocally. We have seen the blockchain, which is a universal ledger, a universal accounting system, where you can see contributions and impact, which we cannot see with national currency. So we have DAOs. That's a distributed autonomous organization. So that's a translocal cooperative that tries to manage collaborative work and payment for a group of people who are not physically together. So in a way, we are now in the process of inventing the institutions of the future, and so that's what we do. That's what we're interested in.
Okay, thank you. Before starting your research on P2P, what were you doing?
Okay, so I worked 9 years as an information analyst for USIA, United States Information Agency, not to be confused with the CIA.
Okay.
USIA is more like the Confucius Institute, the Goethe Institute, Alliance Française. They represent the American culture. Mm-hmm. And I was half librarian and half analyst, so I had to make synthesis. People would ask me questions, what about abortion in the US, and I would have to present it to. So basically, I was doing also knowledge management. Then I worked for British Petroleum, 3 years, in agriculture. Then I worked. I created 2 startups, internet startups, in the 90s. And then my last job was director of strategy for digital adaptation in a big telecommunications company. So I was pretty high, in the management. I was in maybe the top 15%. But my soul was not happy because I didn't feel we were doing good things for the world. I think we were just grabbing what we could. And I saw that the world was not moving in a good direction. Certainly not in Europe. It was not going, things were not going better, but getting worse over time. And so I was asking myself, am I making the world a better place or not? And I said, no, not here. So I said, okay, I have to do something different. I took a 2-year sabbatical, which is, like you don't work and you study and look to understand something new. And then I came back and organized the P2P Foundation. So the P2P Foundation is strong on documentation. We have 40,000 articles on how the world is changing through peer-to-peer and commons-oriented practices, institutions. We make reports. We have a dozen of reports on, for example, on peer-to-peer accounting. It's one report. I also studied the history of civilization and transition dynamics. So I also give courses on civilizational transition and how civilization have changed in the past in order to understand how it would change today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. what do you think is the most urgent need in the contemporary world?
Yeah, I think we need to change the value system. So I think maybe in the 18th century we started changing the value system of the world to a commodity-based value system, and this created, big growth and development, but also at a cost. And the cost is that we have to extract first, make a profit, and then the state taxes the profit and redistributes the value. But the problem is that you always have to have bigger extraction than regeneration. It's not in balance. And now we're reaching the limits of the world. I think we're already over the limits. We already have all kinds of issues like climate change, but there is this thing about planetary ecosystems. We have 9 of them. They're vital for the survival of the planet, and I think 7 of them are already in the danger zone. So we have flooding, we have forest fire, we have all kinds of disturbances in the stability of the ecosystem in the world. And so I think the most important thing is to change the value system. We have to value care and regeneration, not as an afterthought, but as something equally central. And in a way, China, I'm not saying you have succeeded, but you're thinking that way, right? So when you think common prosperity, you're thinking about extract value to make people have a material life. And when you talk about ecological civilization, you're talking about regeneration and care. And ideally, but I don't think you have achieved that yet, but at least you think about it and you already started moving in a direction, is to have a civilization that is actually has both in balance, right? If you extract, you need to regenerate, and it kind of needs to be on the same level. And that's only going to succeed if we recognize other forms of value. So if you care for your children, for your elders, if you heal people, if you restore a forest or make the land better, that should also be value. And today it's not value. Today it's a cost, right? I like to use the example of the 3 nurses. So bear with me. This is a little story. So the first nurse is a Christian nurse, a Catholic nurse, right? They don't get a salary. They work for free. They get food and lodging, and they do it because they believe in their religion. And charity is an obligation of that religion. And I'm sure you have similar things in Buddhism and other religions. So for our commodity society, it has no value. It's nice, but it's not in the GDP. It's not measured. Okay, then the second nurse works for a city hospital, a public hospital, a government hospital. If you look at the budget, she's expensive. She's a cost. Now, ask yourself the question, why is one nurse and another nurse, they're doing the same job, but one is not counted and one is counted as a cost. And then the third nurse works for a private hospital, and she produces profit for the owners of the hospital. So she's the good nurse, right? And that's not normal, because we have 3 nurses doing the same work, and their value is judged differently, and only the profit-making nurse is considered to be valuable. In fact, they're equally valuable. They're doing the same job. So we need to recognize that, and the current system doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next. In one of your articles, you mentioned that your bank accounts and other assets were restricted. What happened?
Oh, okay. yeah. So in the West, starting maybe 2015, we fell victim to a culture war and to identity politics, right? So before that, we had this, the classic, the liberals, pro-capitalists, want more freedom for the market, and then we had the left, socialists, social democrats, more equality, more money for the workers, better pensions, that kind of thing, right? And I belong to that camp. I was a classic leftist. But the new woke cultural left, they divide the world differently. They look at gender, they look at sexual orientation, and different things, and the more extreme versions of it. So I'm an old white male. I'm a triple exploiter. Not because anything I do, but just by my position, right? So in intersectional theory, I'm the universal exploiter. Even if I'm working class, doesn't matter, but just because of my color of my skin, my sexuality. And from a left point of view, I disagree with this. I think this is very bad. Because now everybody's fighting with everybody. Women are fighting men are fighting women, all kinds of stuff. And so I spoke out. And then there's something called cancel culture. So they see that as unacceptable. And so I lost all my funding. I got blacklisted. So I can no longer speak in cultural institutions. The same year, I lost my banking account. I lost access to PayPal. I got deplatformed. So, I got restricted on Facebook and Twitter. And that's it. So I had to reorient myself in the world because of that, because I belong to a different tradition of the left, which is almost dead in a way. So what you see, and this is tragic, in the West, is that the working class is now moving to the right and supporting, people that, like everybody, have good and bad, but certainly they're not pro-ecology. They don't want to take into account any limits. And they basically want to recreate the economy of the 1950s. So, okay, this is very personal point of view, of course. And so, that has affected me deeply because I lost my income, I lost my funding, I was working with 10 people. So I took another sabbatical to rethink what I was doing. I studied civilizational history. And now I work a lot with Web3. Not because they have the solution, because they're quite removed from the physical world, but because they're creating this coordination capacity, right? So using Web3 tools, you can coordinate capital and labor at a world scale, independently of any state or corporation. They work together, but they don't control the whole ecosystem. And I think people like you, people who work in the revitalization of their locality, healing the soil and creating healthy local rural economies that make organic food and all of that, I think these are tools that you can use to become stronger yourself. So they're cosmic, but they're not local. And you're local, but maybe not sufficiently cosmic. And so my dream is to create collaboration between these two layers of capacity. And it's good for them also because they're in an exit strategy, right? They see the world around them is not going well. And so they're hedging. Oh, if Portugal collapses, we can go to Greece. If Greece collapses, we can go to Mexico, right? That is not sustainable. So I think I'm trying to convince some of them that they should invest in regenerative local projects and create these cosmo-local networks.
What do you think the next 20 years will look like? How about the next 50 years?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think the world is changing quite fast and in dramatic ways. And I think the next 5 years will be pretty crucial. So you can already see that the old hegemonic order, US-centric, is declining and disappearing. So all the balances from World War II until 2008, they're unraveling. And these are always very difficult periods because the old is dying, but the new is not ready. So, so society is very unstable. I think you're probably somewhat better off in China because you had a long period of development, and we have a period of decline already, right? So I think as a whole, the world cannot sustain the current level of industrialization. But within that, China, was growing and is still growing, although slower, and the West is declining. So it's slightly different. But I don't think anybody is going to escape the physical limitations of the planet. There's nothing worse for people than losing their status, right? So the working class, in the beginning of industrial capitalism, they were fighting, but in the context of growth. So they could ask for things and eventually get them. And so they were progressive. But once you're losing, you become reactionary, right? So this is a very difficult period for humanity. And I think the best thing to do is to create seed forms, based on fraternity and sorority and a common care for the land and create examples that more and more people can follow in this difficult period, right? I think the old systems will tend to decline, the old institutions. And the new institutions, we don't know exactly what they should be, but this is a time of experimentation, of creating new institutions, of creating new practices, and strengthening these seed forms to be ready to accept more people as the crisis unfolds. And the way to be happy with this is often used is the analogy of the butterfly and the caterpillar. So the caterpillar, knows or doesn't know, but is going to die and is going to be mush, and even his DNA is going to change. So if you're a caterpillar and you realize that you're going to die, this is very depressing. But if you know that the butterfly is coming, you're going to be a beautiful butterfly. So if you focus your attention on the future butterfly, it can make you enthusiastic and positive, right? So that's why I think seed forms are a very healthy way of dealing with crisis. It's focusing on building the new, on constructing, on experimenting, finding good people to work with, and do all the things that we need to do to change our society.
Do you think intentional communities, eco-villages, are meaningful? What significance do they hold?
Yes, there's a Belgian Nobel Prize winning chemist who said, in a sea of chaos, islands of coherence can change everything. And so that's the role of seed forms. And I think intentional communities are like these seed forms. They experiment with new ways of living together, of making decisions. And when they're successful, they can be an example for others, right? And so my historical example would be the role of monasteries. Buddhist monasteries, but also Christian monasteries. They were very efficient. So when a civilization collapses, the market and state collapse. And actually, it's only commons-oriented institutions that survive. And so I'll give you this historical example. So it's 5th century Rome, and and it's falling apart, just as the Han in the same period in China. And so the food came from Egypt, and suddenly they no longer control Egypt. So there's no food in Italy because the villagers have abandoned their villages, and now you only have big landowners with slaves making oil and wine. And so Saint Benedictine is he created rules for living together. So he unites farming, crafts, intellectuals, and mystics in one community, dedicated to making the world a more beautiful and just place, right? And the advantage of an institution like that is that all the surplus goes into the expansion of the form. So the way they did it is by splitting in two whenever they had 64 people, right? So once you reach 64 months, you have to split in two, and like bees, they have to find new land. And basically in 50 years, they solved the food issue. I can give you another example. In the 16th century, Europe was, in the midst of a religious civil war between the Catholics and the Reformation. And so the universities no longer functioned because they were fighting. So it was all about, maintaining dogma and not about learning. And so then what you have is invisible colleges. So people go a little bit underground to preserve learning. So if you think about Masonry, Rosicrucians, Templar orders, so what did they do? I'll give the example of Masonry. So this was a place where bourgeois, aristocrats, and craftsmen could organize together with the vision of God that wasn't divisive, the grand architect of the universe. So you could be a Jew, you could be a Catholic, you could be a Reformation, you could be even a Muslim, and still work together, right? And so they were discreet, so they could protect knowledge. So I don't think we should repeat the same, not the same as in the 5th century, not the same as in the 16th century, but the general principle is of creating smaller communities that build and share knowledge for the next phase of civilization. And the next phase of civilization is about restoration and regenerating the natural capacity of the planet. So that's what I think you are doing. And that's, I think, in general, the role of these intentional communities.
Yes. Do you believe nations are necessary? Why or why not? Are there alternative structures for how the world could operate?
Yeah. So I think whatever we do and however the world changes, we will need physical organizations because we live together in a space, and we need to keep the peace and keep some order and care for old people and educate the young. So we need institutions that do that, right? Now, historically, first we had tribes, then we had monarchies and empire, and then we had nation states, right? So there are 3 different ways of dealing with physical organizations. Empires have collapsed. There's no empire. Now we have imperial, like the West, colonialism, but they were done by nation states, not by an empire. And so I have not a particular position on that. But I think nation states are not adequate enough to deal with planetary challenges, because both corporations and nations have a narcissistic view of the world. They don't care about the whole. They care about their own. Making a profit for a corporation or maintaining and growing the country if you are a nation. And so I don't think there are sufficient institutions for the future. But I don't think the new institutions are completely ready either, right? And in any case, because we will need physical institutions, we will need to find ways of mutual adaptation. So I talk about things like the partner state. So what is a partner state? It's a state that encourages individual and social autonomy. So for example, when you think about the welfare state, about pensions and unemployment money and that kind of thing, right? So this was invented by the working class in the 19th century. They did it themselves as a social commons for themselves, and then the progressive welfare state said, okay, we'll give that to everybody. But by doing that, by statifying the social commons, it became something that the state produces and that the people consume, and it makes them passive and isolated from each other. So maybe a partner state, when you realize that there's too much atomization in society, you can start encouraging, the creation of new communities, of new solidarities. And so a partner state is a city or a country that does that. For example, the Bologna regulation for the care and the regeneration of the urban commons. So this is now in 250 cities in Italy. Any group of people in the city can say, I want to improve this park, river, old factory. And then the city will organize a support with the private sector, the NGO sector, the research sector, and the citizens. So this is called the quintuple helix because you have 5 players, yeah, and they're at the service of the community of citizens to help them succeed in their project. So that's a partner state. Then the second concept I favor is called public commons partnerships instead of public-private partnerships. So public-private partnership is a neoliberal idea where the state makes an agreement with a private corporation to manage some sector of the economy or solve some issue. But the problem is that they because they're for profit, they keep a lot of value for them. You can also do a public commons alliance where the city or the state would ally with a multi-stakeholder group that also represents the citizens, right? So this is public commons partnership. And then the third one is the commonification of public services. So what this means is that instead of just producing something that makes citizens into passive recipients, they just get the money from the state, you organize it differently. For example, in Italy as well, in around Bologna, you have social care cooperatives, right? So it's social cooperatives that actually take care of healthcare, not the state, and the state funds these autonomous organizations. So yeah, I think we need to change the state. We need to work on the local level, and then we need to find out what are the appropriate commons-based institutions at the global level, because international alone doesn't work. International is just the states together. I think that's the all United Nations paradigm. I think we need magisteria of the commons. So global multi-stakeholder institutions that involve the citizens into the management of a certain domain, like ocean commons, air commons. Like, how do we do this? I don't think it should just be the state. I think it should be constructive alliances that are in charge. And I think this is starting to happen in seed form.
Interesting. Do you have any personal wishes or aspirations?
I would like people to find meaning in their life through these constructive activities. I think if you can ally yourself in a commons-oriented community with a positive goal, that is actually something that made me happy, and I think it could make a lot more people happy. It's called passionate engagement, because I think human beings want to be self-actualized. You want to find out why you are here. What am I doing on this planet, right? And maybe religion doesn't work for you, maybe communism doesn't work for you. So what works, I think, today should be your engagement with the constructive community. And as you build your identity by mixing your engagements. So you not necessarily belong to just one community, you can belong to more than one. And so I'm a Buddhist, vegan, I work with the vegan commons, I work with the Buddhist commons, and I engage for the good, for the common good of humanity. So, yeah.
Okay. Could you recommend a book?
Yes.
A movie. And a movie.
Okay, the book would be The Structure of World History by Kojin Karatani. And he talks about new associationism, which is very close to my ideas. But he wrote in the 70s, so he didn't anticipate cognitive AI, robotics, but it's still very, very good. It's a great book. I recommend it. Movies. Okay, it's not a particularly good movie. Well, I really liked it. I really liked it. It's called Cloverfield. And I'll tell you why I liked it. Because I think it's probably the first movie that took a peer-to-peer view. In every movie you always have like God's eye. And, you look at people doing things. You look at Cloverfield, which is, it's not a high theme, but it's about a monster coming into New York City. But the thing is, the movie is made by this, people filming each other, right? And in one scene, you have the monster is coming. You have the army, US Army, trying to fight the monster. And in a normal movie, you would see, oh wow, the fight. But these people, they're concerned about each other. So instead of filming the battle, they look at their friends and say, are you okay? Right? So this movie, in a way, for me, is this shift from point of view, from top down to peer. And that's why I like this movie. I think it's a pivot movie. It shows how human consciousness changed towards this peer-to-peer vision. And it's not that it not existed before, but it could only exist on a small scale, right? Now we have peer-to-peer translocal. This is a civilizational change. It never happened before.
all the things, 这个叫什么 about P2P 都跟 P2P 有关，我发现 peer to peer.
Yeah, it's because it's the new. I believe it's the dominant relationship. So, in a tribe, it's peer to peer, right? But small, close. So I call it little brother, little sister. Yeah, everybody is your aunt, your uncle, your father. You know everybody. Then we go to empire. We work together because we fear the same God and the same emperor. So this is big father, right? Number 2. Then we have the nation. Now we're all citizens, right? We're equal citizens, and the state is big brother, right? And today we have a choice between what I call big sister, which is, this kind of surveillance, good feeling, but, you cannot be bad, or, so it's like a female big brother, big sister. Because it claims to have empathy, it's good for you, It's good for you. Camera, look at you. It's good for you. Or we can scale peer-to-peer collaboration. So I think this is the way. Yeah.
OK. 好像还
So back to little brother, little sister, but at a higher scale. Translocal scale.
Okay.
I think like Uncommons is like this. It's a digital nomad community of Chinese language people, and they all help each other out. They share knowledge. They organized my trip here. So this is a good example of a peer-to-peer network that is very efficient to organize very complex things. And they have people in the whole world.
我看到你的网站上，有写到Fuller, Buckminster Fuller. And 你能不能再推荐几个他觉得比较重要的影响的，对他有重要影响的人物，可能像富勒这样的呀，或者是你要介绍。
So Kojin Karatani, of course, but amongst philosophers, I would say Bernard Stiegler. I think he was the only, and maybe still the only, true peer-to-peer philosopher. And he's a theorist of technology, but he died 2 years ago. He's difficult to read, but he's really, really interesting. And his central notion was the proletarization, but interpreted not like Marx, but in terms of losing knowledge. So now we're creating this world of technology with AI, and we are losing our knowledge because they are replacing us, right? So more and more people in the world, the real danger is that they're becoming less and less informed and knowledgeable, and they lose their skills. So he was focusing on that, and I think that's one of the things you should be doing. If I may allow myself to give you advice, is to really focus on recreating skills. That people have a skill set, they can be proud of their skill set, and they can help people with their skill set. Because our society is de-skilling people more and more. And so he was focused on that. So I think, and there's an interesting student of him, which I haven't read yet, but is quite famous in the world, Yu Gui, who wrote about Chinese cosmotechnics. Again, it's a difficult book, but the West has been dominant for 2 centuries, and so technological thinking is based on Western concepts, and then they were diffused and adapted in the rest of the world. But what he's doing is looking at Confucianism, Taoism, and Chinese Buddhism to see maybe there's a different way of looking at technology that is a better fit for China. So cosmolocalism does not only mean everybody becomes the same at the cosmic level. It also means localism. It also means reviving your local, territorial, contextual knowledge, right? It doesn't mean just like no. It's both. Cosmolocal, you increase the local differentiation, and you increase the functional differentiation at the global level. And both need to be in balance.
好了，讲完了啊。我还有一个问题啊，又想出来，就是说关于这个就是这个智能、人工智能这些事儿。然后它呢，我觉得人工智能，因为现在研发这些技术要消耗很多资源，那么这些资源掌握在少数人手里，那这些少数人他们将来用这些技术，他觉得会做出利于大众的事儿吗
？No. So I think AI has an important function because, so before knowledge was isolated and manageable, so suddenly we create the internet, And now everybody can speak, everybody can publish, everybody can make videos. And so we lost control of our own knowledge, right? And so I see AI as an answer to that. It's a synthesizing machine. It continuously synthesizes that fractal knowledge that nobody can manage. Now, there's two things. One is who owns it, and the second thing is what you do with it. And of course, it's related. Why is who owns it important? Because AI is a capitalist dream, right? You can do everything without people. So you automate production. Labor theory of value. You don't have to pay labor, so you make super profit. But if you don't pay anybody, who is gonna buy your product, right? So you have these robots making stuff, and they're not paying anybody. So this is creating a deep crisis in capitalism. I don't think capitalism is compatible in the end with this new system. It is not. And then, of course, because they control it, they get all the surplus, but they also want to control us, surveil us, manipulate us. So they're using AI for all kinds of, also bad purposes. But I think what's important is what China did with DeepSeek. We're creating an open source AI that can be used locally, and people can download and train their own AI. And so I think AI, its essential function in the future civilization is to maintain thermodynamic balance. So until now, we have managed the economy with money. But money is a very poor reflection of reality. Now with AI, we can look at reality directly. How much matter and energy is flowing in our place? And is that sustainable or not? And it's very complex for human beings to solve this. But with the help of AI, we can monitor globally and locally all the resources. We can look at their pivots, their negative pivots, like, if we use too much copper, let's say we reach the level where it becomes too expensive and then people start stealing copper. They already do that. They steal copper from the railways, and this happens in many African countries because copper is too expensive, right? And I think with AI, we can create something called global thresholds and allocations. So we can actually directly say, humanity, this is how much you can use this year. And so I think AI should be used for that. This is the key usage of AI. And if we do that, we can use AI to save energy. So yes, it will be, use energy, but we can also use it to save energy. And with one of the promises of cosmolocal production is factor 20 reduction in matter and energy. And I have a report on it on the P2P Foundation website. It's called The Thermodynamics of Peer Production. And there's a man called John Takara who follows successful experiments with factor 20 reduction. So cities and places where they actually apply it with success and bring down enormously the usage of matter and energy while maintaining a complex technological society. I think this is going to be the key. So if you ask me what is special about the P2P Foundation, it's the key role of mutualization. That's the key. We need to mutualize. And what nobody else is saying is we need to mutualize. This is the solution.